Yes, hello and welcome. It's a Confessions podcast. That's what this is, the latest confessions from the Simon Mayo Drive Time Show. Thank you very much indeed for downloading this. Here we go with some more terrible tales from the very sinful Radio 2 listeners. This week we have a fatal French faux pas, we have a mortifying medical misadventure, a compromising countryside calamity, and a hula hula hula. Hold on to your food. Dear Father Mayo and the Drive Time Collective, for years now I've kept the memory of my sin at the back of my mind, but recent events have brought it to the fore and I must now approach the confessional and seek forgiveness. My son is currently sitting his GCSEs, which include a French-speaking assessment. This involves a 5-minute interview responding to questions asked by his teacher. It's a very stressful process, and as part of his preparation, I listened dutifully and patiently, prompting his rehearsed responses, and as I did so, I began to recall my own experience many, many years ago. Now, I went to school in the olden days when GCSEs were called O-levels. Our French-speaking assessment was little different as it was taken by an external examiner and we had no prior knowledge of the questions. Having said that, there were a number of dead certs. For example, questions about you, your family, your home, your school life and your holidays. They were sure to come up. And right now, people out there, I still remember J'habite dans ma maison qui donne sur un terrain de sport, which is genuinely part of my French oral. Thank you very much. I attended a small girls' boarding school in the north of England, and my French teacher, Madame Skinner, was very strict and scary. She had a hairy top lip and a formidable bosom. Which is, again...
It's both different times, everyone, different times. But,
something to reckon with, though.
Yeah, oh, well, okay. Well...
Anyway.
Okay.
Actually, Nancy says, think Tom Selleck. So I think that's probably a reference to the hairy top lip. She drilled us methodically. Don't you think? I think so. She drilled us methodically, ensuring that we knew the required vocabulary. Such was her influence that I spent a disproportionate amount of revision time learning key words and phrases, including the French for lorry, as my father was a haulage contractor. Compared with my other revision, I was feeling confident about this one. On the appointed day, she organised the assessment like a military manoeuvre. We were given a set time to arrive at the examination room, and once our assessment was over, we were subjected to a detailed debrief by Madame. Finally, it was my turn, and I sat down in front of the examiner. I delivered textbook answers to the first 3 questions, giving my name, age, and the fact that I have a brother. Next, I was asked about my father. Well, despite the hours of revision, my mind went a complete blank, and panic set in. What was the word for lorry? I looked away from the examiner and down to my skirt, trying desperately to recall. It was probably only seconds, but it felt a lot longer. My face was flushed. Tears sprang to my eyes as I realised I had completely messed this up. Not only that, this was the one that I was feeling confident about. If this one went badly, I was surely destined to fail all my other exams. Looking up, red-faced and sniffy, from nowhere, the words, "Il est mort," blurted out.
What?
He is dead. The examiner paused momentarily and then moved from behind her desk, put her arms around me and led me to the door. In hindsight, I had only spoken 10 words. Such was the speed of my exit that no one was yet in a position to follow, and Madame Skinner was still busy with the previous debrief. Dreading having to explain my failure, I composed myself and returned to classes. For the rest of term, I managed to duck and dive, so avoided contact with my teacher. My secret was safe. Imagine my surprise when on results day, I was awarded a distinction for the assessment, the only girl in my year group to do so, which clinched the French prize, which was a Good Housekeeping recipe book, which I still use to this day. So clearly, says Nancy, Father Mayo, I seek forgiveness not from Madame Skinner, who scared many schoolgirls with her manner, nor from my father, who's still very much alive and extremely fond of this tale. But, Father Mayo, I seek forgiveness from the external examiner, who truly believed she had upset a grieving pupil, and also from the girl who should have won the prize but didn't. She doesn't know where the phrase came. I think it's a particularly great piece of improvisation. Obviously, different times, and we don't recommend that this... I mean, this isn't a way you should get through your French oral assessment when it comes up. Don't, because I don't think anyone will believe it from now on. Anyway, it worked for Nancy. She got a distinction. What do you think, Sister Rebecca?
That's an amazing story, isn't it? And she did show that she could think on her feet. And I do feel sorry for the examiner, but I don't think there's any long-term harm done. And she brought the thing to an end and put her arm around her, which was very sweet. And I think she deserved the prize for the initiative she showed. So I am going to forgive.
L'initiative.
Which is
Something like that.
Definitely not that,
No.
is it?
What is the French word for lorry, anyway?
And moustache. It's moustache.
Is it camion? No, that's
Yes,
is
yes.
it?
Do you know, I'd forgotten it is. Le camion.
Le camion.
Le camion. Oh, yes.
That's Laurie, not moustache, isn't it?
Yeah, le moustache. Le moustache.
Sister Bobby from the
I've lost my
Priory.
train of thought.
Yes.
It's lovely. And what a great, great French teacher she had, her examiner, because it showed a real
Oh,
soft
the
side
examiner,
to her.
yes. I'm not sure Madam Skinner was... She was quite scary.
Oh, well, she's still... I wasn't... I've got myself mixed up there.
Madam Skinner had the top lip.
had the top lip.
And the...
The moustache. Anyway, what I was going to say was no real harm done. It was great initiative. And I have to say, as the only real loser is the person who obviously revised and remembered everything. But we all know in life the way to survive is basically to improvise, isn't it? Really. Knowing all the rules is not always the best way.
Is that right? That's
It's knowing how to
worldly
survive.
wise. Hope you're listening.
when
Write
the-
this
when-
down, kids.
When the rules have changed. When you've forgotten everything.
I don't understand what you're talking about now. Anyway.
Forgiven.
Thank you. Brother Matthew.
I think there are 2 points to make here.
Yes.
One is at least she got it right when she said he's dead. She conjugated the verb mourir correctly and used il est mort instead of the alternative. And the other thing to say is, what school decides to give for the best French person gives them a recipe book? What? No, I don't. Why am I getting a recipe book? Because I'm good at French. Makes no sense. And for that reason, I'm going to forgive, but not the school, for their ridiculous prize system.
So it's the school's...
The school's fault for deciding to give recipe books to people for being good at French.
All right.
Makes no sense.
Okay, thank you very much for those words of wisdom. Now, I only have an initial for this confession. It comes from S. That's all we have. Father Simon, in the Ecclesiastical Collective, I feel I must confess to a lie that I told a few years ago in a moment of panic, and I hope that you can find it within yourselves to forgive me, although I am an art student, so Brother Matthew may be a lost cause.
Well, obviously no prejudice here at all, ever, apart from with art students,
Yes.
obviously.
I'm about to graduate, Father Simon, and have therefore been reminiscing about my past 3 years at university. Lots of memories of working hard in the library and having sensible early nights, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Yeah.
However, one memory that haunts me is of a night early on in my first year. It was around 11 p.m, and I was about to go to bed when I was suddenly gripped by the worst stomach pain that I have ever felt. It was agony. Nothing made it better. I tried lying down, sitting, rocking. It was still agony. My housemate brought me a hot water bottle, which I may have ended up flinging across the room in a moment of frustration. After trying all these things and more, I did what any self-respecting student would do. I called my mum. She told me to go straight down to A&E, so I called a taxi. Thankfully, it was a short journey, although it was not made easy by the driver who kept on saying, "Are you in labour, love? Please don't give birth in my cab." Which really wasn't very helpful. That was mine.
Yeah,
I don't even know.
Absolutely every time, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
And it may well be a cab journey in Strathclyde, but it's
Yes.
still the cab voice.
You all right, love?
Don't give birth. Thanks. When I got there, the kind nurse on reception was concerned it could be appendicitis, and so waved me straight through past the waiting room to see a doctor. Now, this doctor was not just any doctor. He was the most handsome man I have ever seen in my entire life. Think of a combination of Ryan Gosling and Chris Hemsworth. That was this doctor. Hello. That's S speaking, not me. I had already been struggling to speak whilst in such intense pain, but now it was almost impossible. In my defence, I was 18, and before going to university had been at an all-girls school. Handsome men were still something of a novelty to me. Presumably, taking my silence in response to his questions as a sign of extreme pain, he said he would go and get some pain relief before he continued with his examination. I was left alone in my little cubicle for a few minutes while he was gone, and tried again to find a position which was slightly less agonising.
Hello.
When I decided to try crouching down, something happened which led to my terrible lie. My apologies for being indelicate. But upon crouching down, I discovered that the problem was essentially trapped wind. And as anyone knows, trapped wind can be unbelievably painful. I was mortified, but then, as I panicked about whether the handsome doctor could possibly have heard or not, I realised that the pain had gone. It was the sweetest relief. I felt like doing a little jig of joy until the curtain swished back, and there appeared the handsome doctor, bringing me the pain relief that I had so desperately needed until my little, or not so little, windy pops. This is where I have to beg for forgiveness, because I couldn't bear to explain to him that it had actually been trapped wind, and that actually I was fine now. I thought he might guess.
Okay.
Instead, I put on the acting performance of my life, lying there on the little bed and ohing and ahhing and... till I felt a suitable time had passed for me to pretend that the pain relief had actually done its job. Thank you so much, Doctor. I'm so much better now. You knew just what I wanted. I'll just head home, thank you. But actually, Father Simon, he was not to be persuaded, and he replied in a very sexy northern accent, so do your best, Simon.
Go on.
Nope. Because northern accent, I imagine, S means Northern England, which so it could be Cumbria, it could be Lancashire, it could be Yorkshire.
So if we just nominate a region, you'll do it in that accent
Nope.
then. So
He replied, no, it could still be appendicitis. We need to admit you overnight for observation. Now, I know that I should have confessed at this point, or at least pressed harder to go home, but the handsome doctor seemed so concerned and so caring. He really had a way with words. Anyway, I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth, and so instead I let myself be admitted onto one of his wards and endured numerous tests and examinations until I was finally discharged after lunch the next day. Now, I still feel terrible about this. Both of my parents work in the NHS, and I know how stretched the A&E resources are. I would never deliberately waste hospital time, but this doctor was just so handsome that I was unable to speak the truth. If it helps you to forgive me, I did have a terrible night in the hospital, as the drugs made me very sick, and I got no sleep. So please find it in your hearts to forgive me. I promise that I am now able to handle myself far better in the presence of a good-looking man. I can hold my wind, and I would never tell such fibs ever, ever, ever again. With deep regret. That's from S. Well, who would have thought? I mean, you have to take all the precautions, and people know trapped wind is very painful. But, what do you think there,
It's
Sister
like
Rebecca?
that scene in The Last King of Scotland, isn't it, when Ewan McGregor helps out... do you remember that bit?
Yeah.
Anyway, he thinks he's dying, and in fact he's got trapped wind.
It's trapped wind.
very, very painful.
The rest of it is not at all like The Last King of Scotland. But anyway.
It's not. Well, she wasted NHS resources. It's terrible.
She knows that.
For the sake of a good-looking doctor.
She said that.
Yeah, she said that. But I can see, he's in a position of authority, and she really likes him, and it's kind of embarrassing. I kind of see why she lied. And so I'm going to forgive.
Nicely done, Sister Bobby from the Priory. What do you think?
I'd like to think that actually he heard. He heard and thought, now, because of that, and you haven't been up front with me, I'm now going to make you stay in this hospital, a hospital where it's quite noisy and it's difficult to get sleep, and you'll be more shattered afterwards. But one thing I'm perplexed by, I don't think doctors often administer pain relief before they know the problem. That's the only thing I'm a little confused by. I'm a little bit confused by that doctor. Was he a real doctor?
Yeah.
Was he real, this good-looking doctor?
He was just a stranger walking past in a white coat.
This is just, the thing is, what could you say, really? It's embarrassing. I understand, you're 18 years old, you didn't know what to say. It's difficult, it's embarrassing. I had trapped wind, doctor. It's not something that you really want to kind of let loose.
There are a lot of confessions from people who've sort of pretended to, it started off
the thing
trying to get off school.
Someone could have needed that bed. They might have been desperate. So I'm caught between a rock and a hard place. But let's say that you were naive, you were young. Let's forgive you this time.
Forgiveness, okay. Right.
Yeah, I mean, dishy doctors, everything going their way, and I am of the mind that he definitely knew that that's what had happened, and he was trying to call her bluff and saying, yes, well, let's have you staying overnight.
Is this your sexy northern accent?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So I am going to forgive, just because I don't want to be on the side of the dishy doctor and his way with whatevers.
Okay, nicely done. Mr. X sends in tonight's confession. Thank you very much indeed. because there's no name on it, so therefore we just added Mr. X. Thank you very much. Dear Father Simon and the Brothers and Sisters of Mercy, this confession goes back to the mid-1970s. I was living in Barnsley, and our house, the one my parents still live in to this day, had a large field backing onto it. It was a very large field with plenty of space for playing out, and you could run around there all day. You also had plenty of space, so you could exercise your dog, such as the one that we had, a large Alsatian dog called Judy. I thought that Judy was pretty well trained, but perhaps I should have spent a little more time in training her not to pick up strange objects off the floor that might belong to someone else. One fateful day, or perhaps that should be evening, as was the routine, it was time to take Judy out for her nighttime walk before she came back to have her chappie. That's and win a lot. That's the food.
Okay.
It's not the movie. She wasn't watching. Just to be clear. The usual routine was that my dad would take Judy out for her evening walk. However, on this occasion, my dad was in hospital and my mum took Judy on her walk instead. This time of year, it was rather dark. Very little could be seen in detail in the unlit field. At first, nothing out of the ordinary occurred. Judy went for her walk, making full use of the wonderful green field. She went running back and forth across the vast expanse of greenery. However, as she was doing this, my mother heard voices in the distance. Listening more carefully, there was what sounded like a man and a woman, and they were sounding quite irate. Judy came running back, and she appeared to have something in her mouth. It was difficult to tell what it was, because it was so dark. Anyway, she kept running about. She had this thing flapping around. Anyway, then a person came running over, and this must have been one of the voices that she'd heard earlier. So he was uttering obscenities and sounded quite annoyed, to say the least. As the man came closer, it appeared that he had no trousers on.
I knew it.
And he seemed to actually be in a state of near nakedness. The following words the man uttered have been slightly altered to make them suit a family programme. "Oh dear," said the man. "That bloomin' dog has got my bloomin' trousers. What an inconvenience. What a carry-on." Well, what appeared to have happened is this man had taken the opportunity of the dark evening and the anonymity that brought with it to cool off a bit by removing his trousers.
What?
And a lady seemed to be similarly annoyed by the combination of heat and clothes. And in the throes of their activities, it appeared that suddenly the man had seen a slobbering, very large Alsatian looking down at him, who then went to run away with his trousers, which were just neatly folded. This man was now running all over the field, chasing Judy, trying to regain his lost trousers, but Judy, not willing to give up her new prize, was reluctant to part with them. She could run much faster than him anyway. Anyway, eventually, it's like a Benny Hill episode. Eventually, somewhere in the vast expanse of the field, Judy got bored with the trousers and dropped them. Now, however, they sported a toothy hole where his bottom should be and a bigger flappy hole at the front of the trousers. I suspect that the man had to return home with strategically placed hands. Father Simon, we need to ask forgiveness, not from the man whose evening was brought to such a rude halt. He and a woman should have got a room and a clothes rack. But from anyone who encountered a rather cross and embarrassed, frustrated man shuffling sideways in the small hours. Mr. X needs the forgiveness, because basically it's their fault. Well, it's Judy's fault for running away with the trousers. And a better trained dog would have not done that kind of thing.
What a carry-on,
imagine
eh?
that. Imagine that being so hot of an evening that you just think, I've undone the button on my shirt and now I'm going to have
It
to
must have
remove
been
my
that record
trousers.
Hot Summer, was it 76? Was
Almost
it?
certainly
Yeah.
76, because
Yeah.
everyone was taking their
Exactly,
trousers
exactly.
off.
I mean,
in the day.
that really was a slapstick confession, wasn't it?
It was really.
I mean, the thing is, the dog. I don't think you can train a dog not to run away with strange objects left in fields. So I don't think you can blame the dog.
No.
But I also don't think you can blame the couple either, because, as you said, it was very hot. And so, I mean, it's difficult, this one. Mr. X
Yes.
perhaps should have... it was his mother who took him for a walk, so you can't even blame... I don't know what to say about this. I'm going to forgive.
You are gonna
because I
forgive.
think they're all blameless.
If in doubt, no harm done. Well, apart from to his guy's trousers. Sister Bobby from the Priory.
Oh, potentially. This is indecent exposure, isn't it, really?
Is it?
Did you say there was another person in the woods with them?
I think you're...
Another friend?
Yes.
Oh, they were on their own. Okay.
Well, there was a
so
man.
they're both very hot.
There was a man and a woman who. Well, it was just hot.
Cooling
that's all.
off.
Yes.
Right, okay. Do you know
Yeah.
what? Judy, well done. Well done, the dog. Mr. X's mum, well done, saving whoever was also walking across the park that
Have you
night.
been on the sauce?
No, I'm just saying.
Were you listening?
Yeah, it was very hot.
There's a lot of code in there.
It was very hot. You've
Yes.
taken your trousers off to cool off in a public place.
Who hasn't?
Yes,
Who
yes.
hasn't done that?
It was dark.
It's
though.
like the
Yeah.
Edinburgh Festival all
in
over
the
again.
dark. In the dark.
Anyway, moving on.
You're forgiven.
Okay, Brother Matthew.
Frankly, if you choose to live this bohemian lifestyle where you think that it's okay to take off your clothes because it's a bit hot in the dark and go to your local park, then you deserve everything you get. And frankly, dogs running off with your trousers is the least of your problems. So I am definitely going to forgive because of that.
That's a moral stance
Yes,
you've
it
taken
is. Yes.
right there.
Quite right too.
Just be doing a few impressions.
That's very good.
Was it? Yeah, very much.
It is, to be fair, the only one you can do.
Yeah, I was doing.
Yeah.
It was a gentleman stopped me yesterday. I was on the way home, and he said, "Love the confession tonight. I love the confession. Particularly love that one with the supermarket and the baby in the box. Corker." Anyway, so thanks very much.
Yeah.
Good. Can we work that into the confession? I rather like that.
Yeah, thanks very much. Anyway, it's confession time. The novice is in. And this one comes from Gary, and I'll just repeat the fact that this does have a warning, particularly if there's food involved at the moment in your house. That's all I'm saying. It's just, you might just, it's the thing. It's perfect. It's not outrageous. It's just something that you need to know. That's all. PG certificate. Dear Absolving Assembly, on bended knee and in penitent shame, I humbly seek your forgiveness, says Gary. Some years ago, I was lucky enough to work for a year in Vancouver, British Columbia. A very enjoyable year for my family. Changed our outlook on life. One of our best decisions that year was to see as much as we could of North America. When the spring break came, just before we were due to return to the UK, we were delighted to take up the offer of a cheap week in a friend's small, but to us ideal beachfront Hawaiian condominium.
Lovely.
Now, exactly. Before Brother Matt thinks we went off on some swanky, all-expenses-paid trip,
Which you did.
we did it all on the cheap with my wife scouring the internet for cheap flights across the Pacific.
Oh, right.
Anyway, the week came and off we travelled, surf shorts packed, sun is on, sandals ready for the beach. And I have to say, Maui was better than even we had expected.
Just so we're not clear, it's Hawaii, everyone. Yeah, thanks.
Our previous knowledge of Hawaii coming from episodes of Hawaii Five-0 and Lilo and Stitch. Sunny, palm-fringed beaches, blue seas, hot chicks and surf dudes, and friendly Hawaiian folk saying aloha all the time. Now, my wife is a restless... I think that's quite enough of that. My wife is a restless soul who likes us to be doing something active each day on holiday, and as I've already alluded, she is a good researcher. And she sought out an early morning trip snorkelling with turtles, which she duly booked. Now, the vessel was a converted catamaran, and after all the safety chat from the surfer dude's crew and handing out life jackets, snorkels and flippers, we found a comfy spot on the boat with a couple of dozen other folk, all Yanks, and set out across the bay. Now, I'm quite prone to seasickness, Simon, and despite it being quite windy, I was surprised how easy it was crossing across the bay to the small volcanic island where the turtles frolicked beneath the waves. The wind was behind us. It being very early, the proprietors had provided breakfast and a free bar. Our two sons... always
Okay, yeah.
the combination of breakfast and a
Free
free
bar, everyone.
Our two sons, then in their early teens, looked expectantly at their mother as they gazed at the limitless supplies of fizzy cola and other carbonated drinks. Could they have one? Hey, we're on holiday. We paid for it. Why the heck not? What could possibly go wrong? We took in the view across the Pacific as the boys tucked in. Having been fed on croissant coffee, or in our children's case, cola, we arrived at the Turtles' home. It was a wonderful experience, but all too quickly, it was time to get back on the boat and retrace our route back to the harbour. Now we were into the wind. And the crossing was somewhat choppier than the outward leg. Indeed, it resembled a scene from The Cruel Sea, the catamaran climbing the white tops to come crashing down, spraying any passengers in the vicinity. The effect of the rolling waves on the landlubbers was dramatic, and a number of people, including a large Texan woman in a white T-shirt, were already leaning over the side. At this point, we spotted our youngest boy, Tom, who we were unaware had consumed 6 cans of cola. What? He was a shade of skin colour somewhere between green and grey. His mother had the presence of mind to shout, "Tom, over the side!" Reflexively,
Threw his brother over.
he followed his mother's instruction, but to our horror, he headed for the nearest windward side.
Oh, here we go.
He made it just in time for his largely liquid breakfast to reappear over the side of the boat straight into the wind. To our alarm, we saw his breakfast choices arc upwards across the boat and land on the unmissable target of the large Texan lady's immaculate white T-shirt. Tom crawled over to us and spent the rest of the journey comforted by his mother, while the rest of us tried to look invisible. At this point, the Texan lady's friend looked over at her and said, "Oh my God, Darlene, how the hell did you vomit on your own back?"
It's good. It's two voices, isn't
It's
it?
a whole new Darlene.
We've moved on from
Diggity
Corker
dog.
with style.
Thank you. Well, should we say something? Well, obviously not, and we crept quietly off the boat, safe in the knowledge that no one else had seen the errant emesis on its fateful journey across the boat to Pebble Dash poor Darlene's T-shirt. So merciful, dear merciful Mum, I need your forgiveness, not of the large Texan lady in her splattered T-shirt who thought that... I'm going to have to leave that bit out. But to Tom for not offering some parental restraint on his consumption of fizzy pop on a choppy crossing, but who has learnt a valuable life lesson about fizzy drinks and seasickness, and that is that you don't combine the two. Let that be a lesson to everybody. Kids, if you're in that situation where you have a chance to have this kind of music, yeah, you don't have fizzy drinks and you don't have the free breakfast. That's basically what's happening there. Sister Rebecca, what do you
Well, he
think?
consumed 6 cans of the stuff, right?
6
which was
for
over
breakfast.
the top. Yeah, I think that the parents should have been on that a bit better. And also, when the mother says, "Over the side, Tom," she should have gone, "Not into the wind." So really, it was the mother's fault. She should have specified that he should go over the side in the other direction. So I'm not blaming Gary, actually, I'm blaming his wife. So I'm forgiving Gary.
Yes, Gary's wife. We don't know Gary's wife's name, I don't think. Anyway, what do you think about that, Novice? Who are you blaming?
Well, I'm sagging at Darlene. I tend to know, I think really from a lifetime of history, but if I vommed, I'm aware of it. So if she didn't think that she'd been sick herself, but I'd
Maybe she had been.
Maybe and caught it, got a bit of a backdraft.
It's all down there, look.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that didn't come out a great light. But also, as you say, I mean, these kids, if you can't monitor them with lots of fizzy drinks going down the clacker and coming back at greater rate. And we nearly lost Tom overside because if his brother had been literal, he'd have gone. He'd have chucked him. Anyway,
Anything
so
can happen.
not forgiven.
Not forgiven.
Gary, all you miss is very absentee parenting.
Okay.
Come on, you.
Brother Matthew.
Well, you only live once, and, you know, which of us has not consumed 6 cans of Coke in one go? When you're young, you know, these kind of things happen. And also, he's not Captain Birdseye. He doesn't know which way is windward, which way he should be going out over the side of. So, you know, you can't blame the kid for that. And also, what's she doing wearing a white T-shirt? Anyone who wears a white T-shirt on that kind of trip deserves everything they get. And for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Nicely argued. They were what we managed to do this week for our confessions. If you have one, please tell us now. confessions@bbc.co.uk. More in a week, and the Weekly Mayo available download this and every Friday. It's got some Clive Anderson and some Anthony Horowitz, some recipes for raw beef, and our book club choice. That's on the other podcast. Download that as well. Thank you very much.